The great hall of the alien palace shook as the queen walked in. Her long robe of dark silver dragged against the black stone floor, and every soldier and general bowed low. The air was heavy, thick with fear and respect. She was not only their leader, she was their weapon, their last hope, and their curse. The queen stopped at the center of the chamber. Her sharp golden eyes scanned the room, glowing with fire. Every warrior waited for her words, their hearts racing because when the queen spoke, galaxies trembled. Her voice cut the silence like a blade. War. Humanity has taken too much from us. They think we are weak, broken, and scattered. But tonight I declare war. We will burn their worlds. We will crush their fleets. We will make them kneel. The hall roared with screams of loyalty. Spears struck the floor. The soldiers shouted her name, their voices echoing like thunder. But behind the queen's fury, something deeper stirred inside her chest. For a moment her voice cracked, not with weakness, but with pain. None of her generals dared to notice. They all saw only her anger, not the shadow of grief that lived in her heart. She raised her hands. Humanity has taken everything. They destroyed our cities. They killed our kin. They must pay for what they have done. The warriors cheered again, but her mind slipped away. In her memory, a softer image returned. Two small girls with gentle eyes laughing in the royal garden under twin moons. Her daughters, her treasures, her reason to live. But the garden was gone, burned, destroyed. The girls had vanished during the chaos of the last war. Some said they were dead. Some whispered they were stolen by humans. The queen never found their bodies, and so her heart had chosen only one path: vengeance. She clenched her fists, pushing the memory aside. Prepare the fleet, she commanded. Every ship must be ready. We will strike their colonies first. Leave no trace of their pride. Her generals saluted and hurried to carry out her orders. The room emptied, leaving only the queen and the cold silence of her own thoughts. She walked toward the giant window of the palace, looking out at the stars. From this height, entire galaxies looked small, fragile, easy to crush. Her reflection stared back at her, a face carved with power but lined with sorrow. Humans, she whispered softly, her voice now weak and almost breaking. You took my daughters. You left me with nothing. Her hand trembled just for a moment before she tightened it again into a fist. She could never show weakness, not in front of her people. To them she was a goddess of war. But inside she was a mother, broken, grieving, and desperate. Far away, across the galaxy, those same humans she hated sat unaware of the storm coming their way. Her armies were moving, her ships were fueling, her rage was spreading like fire. But fate was strange. It had a cruel sense of humor. While the queen prepared to burn humanity, somewhere on a distant battlefield, her missing daughters were not dead. They were not lost. They were alive. And even stranger, they were safe. Not in the arms of aliens, but in the arms of a human soldier who had no idea who they were. The queen did not know this truth yet. All she knew was rage, and all she could feel was the ache of emptiness. She turned back from the window, her cloak sweeping across the floor like a storm cloud. Her guards followed her closely, silent as shadows. Summon the war council, she ordered coldly, and send a message to every world under my rule. Tell them the queen has spoken. Tell them humanity will fall. The guards saluted and left, their heavy steps fading into the distance. Alone again, the queen sat upon her throne. The black stone chair felt like ice beneath her. She closed her eyes. For a brief second, she heard soft voices, her daughter's laughter echoing in her memory. The sound was so real it hurt her. Her eyes snapped open, filled with fire once again. She could not allow herself to hope. Hope was weakness, and weakness was death. The drums of war began to beat outside, echoing across the palace. The fleet was rising. Soldiers armed themselves, the skies filled with the glow of engines preparing for battle. The queen stood tall, her shadow stretching long across the hall. Her war cry had been spoken, and the galaxy would soon bleed because of it. But deep inside her heart, behind the rage and the hate, one silent truth still lived. She did not only want to destroy humanity. She wanted to find her daughters, and she would tear through 1,000 worlds to see them again. And so the war began, with fire in her voice, pain in her heart, and a storm waiting to fall upon humanity. The battlefield was quiet now. Smoke still rose from broken machines and the ground was littered with ash. The war had passed through this place like a storm, leaving nothing but silence. Among the ruins walked a single human soldier. His armor was scratched, his rifle heavy on his back. His name was Daniel, though most people just called him the Survivor. He had fought too many battles, seen too many graves. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes carried something rare: kindness. He did not walk with the pride of a warrior. He walked like a man carrying a heavy burden, as if the dead followed him with every step. That night he found shelter inside the ruins of an old village. Walls stood broken, doors burned, but one house still had a roof. He set down his pack and built a small fire with scraps of wood. The flames flickered, chasing away the darkness for a while. Daniel sat near the fire and took out a small picture, a photograph of his own family, long gone. His wife and child had died in the first wave of the war. He had no one left, yet he still fought. Not for revenge, not for glory, only because if he stopped, more innocent people would die. As he stared at the picture, a faint sound reached his ears. At first he thought it was the wind, but then it came again, a soft cry, weak and trembling. His heart jumped. Out here in this ruined land there should be no children, no voices, no life. Daniel stood gripping his weapon. He followed the sound through the rubble, moving carefully, his boots silent on the broken stone. The cries grew clearer, like the whimper of someone too weak to call for help. At last he reached the mouth of a half-hidden cave, covered by fallen stone. The sound was coming from inside. He hesitated. Was it a trap? Could it be an injured soldier, or worse, a wounded alien waiting to strike? But the cries were too soft, too fragile. His heart told him this was no soldier. He lowered his weapon and stepped inside. The cave was damp and cold. His light cut through the darkness, and then he froze. Two small figures lay curled together against the wall. Their skin shimmered faintly in the light, not human, but alien. Their faces were pale, their clothes torn, their eyes half closed from hunger and exhaustion. Children. Daniel's chest tightened. He had not seen alien children before, not like this. They were supposed to be the enemy, monsters, the reason his own child was gone. But looking at them now, shivering and weak, he could not see enemies. He only saw lost girls. One of them tried to move, lifting her head slowly. Her eyes, bright and strange, locked onto his. She did not speak his language, but fear was clear in her gaze. She pressed closer to the other girl, whispering something in a tongue he did not know. Daniel lowered his weapon completely. He knelt on one knee, keeping his hands open so they would see he meant no harm. "It's all right," he said softly. His voice echoed in the cave. "I won't hurt you." The girls did not answer. They only watched him with wide, frightened eyes. His mind battled itself. He knew what his orders said. Report any alien survivors, especially children of high bloodlines. They could be spies, they could be dangerous. They could be the key to the enemy's strength. But another part of him, the part that remembered his own daughter, could not abandon them. Daniel slowly took out his canteen and placed it on the ground. He slid it closer. The older girl stared at it for a long time before reaching out with trembling fingers. She took a sip, then carefully gave it to the younger one. They drank greedily, their lips shaking. For the first time in many years, Daniel felt something stir inside him. Not anger, not duty, something else. Something he thought had died with his family. Hope. He stayed there a long time, watching over them. He did not know who they were, or why they were alone. He only knew one thing. He could not leave them here. As the night grew colder, the younger girl slipped against her sister, then against him. Without knowing, they leaned on his chest, their tiny hands clutching at his coat. He did not move. He let them rest, his heart heavy with the strange truth. They were the enemy's children, but at that moment they were also his responsibility. And as Daniel sat in the darkness, two alien girls breathing softly against him, he did not yet realize that his choice tonight would change the fate of the war and the fate of the galaxy itself. The fire in the ruined village had burned down to glowing embers, but Daniel did not sleep. The two alien girls rested against him, their breath soft and uneven. Their small bodies trembled even in sleep, as if their dreams were filled with fear. Daniel's mind raced. He had fought aliens for years. He had buried friends, lost family, and carried scars across his body because of their war. Yet here in his arms were two alien children, helpless, fragile, and clinging to him as if he was the only safe place left in the galaxy. He looked at them carefully under the dim light. Their skin shimmered faintly like crystal dust, and their eyes, when they opened, glowed softly in the dark. They were not ordinary alien children. Something about them felt different, important. The older one stirred awake first. Her eyes blinked open, bright like liquid gold. She looked at him without speaking, her gaze sharp and knowing. She was only a child, but there was pride in the way she sat up, almost like a young leader. She whispered in her language, pointing to herself and then to her sister. "Serenia, Lyra," Daniel repeated softly, trying to match her tone. "Serenia, Lyra." For the first time her face softened, but his heart sank when he realized the truth. These were not just random children. Their features, their strange glow, their commanding aura. He had heard soldiers whisper of them. The missing daughters of the alien queen, the same queen who had just declared war. Daniel's hands tightened into fists. If this was true, then the girls resting on his chest were the bloodline of humanity's greatest enemy. The war itself lived in their veins. If the army found out, they would be taken, used, or executed, and if the queen discovered he had them, the entire galaxy would burn. He stood slowly, pacing at the mouth of the cave. He had a choice. He could call for extraction, hand them over to the commanders, and maybe earn reward or mercy. But the thought twisted his stomach. He had seen what humans did to captured aliens. He had seen cages, experiments, screams in the dark. He looked back at the girls. They were still weak, their faces pale, their bodies curled tightly together. They were not soldiers. They were not monsters. They were children, children who had no one left. Serenia's small voice broke the silence. She reached out, touching his wrist with trembling fingers. "Safe?" she asked in broken, shaky English. The word pierced his heart like a blade. "Yes," he whispered, his voice rough. "Safe." For the first time in years, he meant it. The soldier in him screamed this was a mistake. The father in him, the broken man who once had a daughter of his own, refused to let go. That night, Daniel made a silent promise. He would not betray them. No matter who they were, no matter what danger it brought, he would protect them. He did not know the truth, that the alien queen herself was searching for them, tearing worlds apart in her rage. He did not know that assassins were already moving across battlefields, hunting for the same secret he now carried in his arms, but fate had chosen him. As the dawn broke and light spilled into the cave, Daniel tightened his grip on his weapon. He was no longer just a soldier. He was a guardian, and protecting these girls would not just test his strength, it would decide the future of the war. Far above, beyond the clouds, ships of the alien fleet began to rise into the stars. The Queen's war cry had already shaken the galaxy, and somewhere deep inside, a storm was coming, one that would pit a grieving mother against a human soldier who had given her daughters the one thing she no longer believed in: peace. The throne room of the alien palace was darker than night itself. Torches burned with blue fire, and shadows stretched across the black stone walls. At the center, the Queen sat, her hands gripping the armrests of her throne so tightly that cracks spread beneath her fingers. Her generals knelt before her, afraid to look directly at her face. "They live," the Queen hissed, her voice cold but shaking with fury. "My daughters live. Do you think I do not feel it? A mother knows." The hall trembled with her words. For weeks she had searched. Entire colonies had been burned, villages turned to ash just for a whisper of their presence. But every time she reached, they slipped away like light through her hands. She stood, her cloak sweeping the floor like a storm cloud. Her golden eyes burned like twin suns. "Send the hunters," she commanded. "Every spy, every assassin, every blade that serves my crown. I want the stars themselves searched. Whoever hides them, whoever dares touch them, will be torn apart." The generals bowed lower, voices trembling. "Yes, my queen." Outside, the great war drums began again. Fleets of black ships rose from the palace grounds, their engines glowing with cruel light. Small strike teams scattered into the galaxy like wolves released from a cage. The Queen walked to the tall mirror beside her throne. Her reflection stared back, regal and powerful, but her eyes betrayed her heart. She touched the glass gently as if it could give her back what she had lost. Serenia, Lyra. She whispered their names like a prayer. For a brief moment, her face softened, pain breaking through her mask of rage. But then she turned away, her expression once again iron. She would not stop. Not until she held them again. Far away, Daniel felt the danger in the air before he even saw it. The cave was no longer safe. He had left early at dawn, carrying Serenia and Lyra with him. They walked through broken forests, across the skeletons of battlefields, always moving, always watching the skies. At night, strange sounds haunted the ruins. Silent footsteps, whispers in languages he did not know. The hunters were near. Once, while resting near the edge of a burned-out city, Daniel spotted them. 3 figures cloaked in shadows, moving with unnatural grace. Their eyes glowed faintly as they sniffed the air, searching. The girls clung to him, their tiny fingers digging into his sleeve. Serenia's eyes widened with recognition. She knew who they were. Hunters, she whispered in her own tongue. Daniel understood the fear in her voice. He pressed them close against his chest and ducked into the ruins. He moved silently, his soldier's training guiding his every step. But he knew these were not ordinary soldiers. These were predators, and they would not stop until blood was spilled. Back in the palace, the queen stood alone on her balcony, staring at the endless stars. She could almost feel her daughter's presence, alive but distant. She clenched her fist. "Whoever holds you," she murmured, her voice sharp as steel, "they will pay with their life. I will burn their world to ash. I will," but her voice broke before she could finish. For even in her fury, one question haunted her. What if her daughters were not prisoners? What if they had chosen a human? The thought was unbearable. Her eyes filled with fire once more. She would find the truth. And when she did, nothing in the galaxy would stop her. The hunt had begun. And somewhere in the shadows, Daniel knew the storm was closing in. The forest was quiet, but Daniel knew the silence was a lie. Birds had stopped singing. The wind seemed to hold its breath. He could feel eyes on his back, sharp as knives. The hunters were close. He crouched low behind a fallen tree, pulling Serenia and Lyra closer. Their faces were pale, their lips trembling. They were exhausted from days of moving, their small bodies too weak to keep running. "We can't stop," Daniel whispered, his voice firm but gentle. "Just a little more." But Serenia, the older one, shook her head. Her golden eyes glistened with tears. She pressed a hand against his chest and whispered in broken words, "Tired, safe, here." Her trust pierced through him. She believed he could protect them, even while he knew death was only steps away. Daniel's hands shook as he loaded his rifle. He had been a soldier his whole life. Orders were clear, simple: protect humanity, destroy the enemy. But this was different. These girls were supposed to be the enemy, yet they looked at him like he was their father, their protector. His mind raced. If he called command now, if he sent a signal, soldiers would arrive. They would take the girls, chain them, maybe worse. His part would be over. His burden gone, but he knew what would happen to them. He had seen cages filled with frightened prisoners. He had heard the screams of experiments carried out in secret labs. No child deserved that fate. Not human, not alien, not anyone. And so the choice tore him apart. Duty demanded betrayal. His heart demanded protection. Lyra, the younger one, shifted against him, curling into his chest like a child who had known him forever. Her soft voice, weak and trembling, slipped into his ears. "Papa," the word froze him. It was broken, barely formed, but he understood. She had called him father. Tears stung Daniel's eyes, tears he had not shed since the day his own daughter died. His arms tightened around them both, and in that moment the choice was made. He would not give them up. Not for medals, not for safety, not for anything. "All right," he whispered, pressing his forehead against Serenia's. "You're mine now. I'll protect you." No matter what it costs, that night the hunters struck. Shadows moved through the forest, silent as ghosts. Their blades gleamed in the moonlight. Daniel woke instantly, his soldier instincts alive. He pulled the girls behind him, his rifle ready. The first hunter leapt from the trees, landing with inhuman speed. Daniel fired. The shot tore through the silence, dropping the figure in a flash of blue blood. The girls screamed, clinging to each other. Another hunter charged. Daniel rolled across the dirt, firing again, the blast lighting up the night. His heart pounded like a drum. For every enemy he cut down, two more seemed to rise, but he did not fall back. He stood his ground, shielding the girls with his own body. He had chosen his path, and he would see it through. Far above, in the heart of her fleet, the queen sat restless on her throne. Her heart pulsed with strange energy. Her daughters were close, but shielded, hidden from her sight. She rose suddenly, her voice a whisper filled with fury. "Who holds you? Who dares keep you from me?" She could feel the bond, faint but real, linking her to them. And strangely, she felt another presence, human. Her rage deepened. The war was no longer about power or land. It was about blood. Her blood. And she would tear apart every star in her path until her daughters were back in her arms. Back on the forest floor, Daniel knelt in the dirt, breath ragged, rifle hot in his hands. The hunters lay dead around him, but he knew more would come. The girls pressed against him, their tears wetting his armor. He wrapped his arms around them, whispering over and over, "You're safe. You're safe with me." But in his heart, he knew safety was an illusion. The queen's hunt would never stop, and when she finally came, she would not just bring hunters. She would bring the fury of an empire. And when that day came, Daniel's choice tonight would be tested harder than he could imagine. The night was still, but Daniel felt the weight of it pressing down like a storm. The hunters were gone, their bodies cooling in the dirt, but he knew it wasn't over. Something stronger was coming. Something unstoppable. He built a small fire inside the cave, just enough to keep Serenia and Lyra warm. They had cried themselves to sleep, their tiny heads resting on his chest. Their breaths rose and fell against him, soft and steady. For the first time, they looked peaceful. Daniel sat with his rifle close, staring at the flames. His body was bruised, his armor dented, his spirit tired. Yet holding them like this, he felt stronger than he had in years. He whispered to himself as if promising to the stars, "They'll live, even if I don't." But then, the fire dimmed. The air turned cold. The ground itself seemed to shiver. Daniel's heart sank. She was here. From the mouth of the cave, a tall figure stepped into the light. Cloaked in shadows, crowned with silver thorns, her golden eyes burned like suns. The alien queen. Her presence filled the cave, choking the air. She looked at Daniel first, not with fear, not even with surprise, but with a fury so deep it could burn galaxies. Her voice rolled like thunder. "Human." Daniel did not move. His rifle was in reach, but he knew it would mean nothing. Against her, weapons were toys. She stepped closer, her gaze falling on the small bodies curled against his chest. For a moment, her steps faltered. Her breath caught in her throat. "Serenia, Lyra." Her voice cracked for the first time in years. Daniel tightened his arms protectively around the girls. "You'll have to kill me first." The queen's eyes snapped to him, blazing. "You dare?" Her hand rose, glowing with deadly energy. The cave walls shook. Dust rained down from the ceiling. One flick of her fingers and he would be nothing but ash. But then Serenia stirred. She opened her eyes slowly, saw the towering figure in the shadows, and whispered in her alien tongue, "Mother." The word broke the silence. The queen froze. Her power flickered out. Her breath trembled as her daughters blinked up at her, confused but alive, their small hands still clutching the human's coat. For a moment, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. Here was the scene no one could have imagined. The alien queen, destroyer of worlds, staring at her daughters resting peacefully on the chest of the very human she had sworn to wipe out. Her rage crumbled. Her knees weakened. She stepped forward, but not with fire. This time with tears she could no longer hide. "Mine," she whispered, falling to her knees. "My blood. My children." Daniel's rifle slipped from his hand. He looked at her, not as a soldier, but as a father. Their eyes met, two enemies bound by the same truth. They both had lost everything. They both had chosen to protect. And now fate had brought them together in the most impossible way. The cave filled with silence, broken only by the soft breathing of the girls who, in their sleep, had built a fragile bridge between war and peace. And in that fragile moment, the greatest question of the war was born. Would the queen strike him down, or thank him for giving her children the one thing she had forgotten existed, safety? The cave was silent, but not with peace. It was the silence before a storm, the kind that crushed the air and froze the blood. Daniel sat against the stone wall, his arms wrapped around Serenia and Lyra as they slept, unaware of the shadow standing before them. The alien queen's golden eyes burned like fire, her cloak billowing in a wind that did not exist. Her hands shook. One was still raised, glowing with power strong enough to crush the human where he sat. But she could not move her daughters, her flesh, her lost stars. They were here, alive, yet leaning against the chest of a human soldier. Daniel's voice was low, steady, though his heart thundered. "If you're going to kill me, do it fast. But don't harm them." The queen's eyes locked on him. "You protect them as if they were your own." "I do," Daniel answered without hesitation. "Because someone had to." The queen's chest tightened. His words struck deeper than any blade. For years she had told herself she was strong, that she needed only war to survive. But seeing her daughters clinging to him, their small hands curled into his coat, she saw the truth. She had not protected them. She had lost them. And a human, her enemy, had given them what she could not. Her voice cracked. "Why? Why would you protect the blood of your enemy?" Daniel's eyes softened, filled with a pain she recognized all too well. "Because I once had a daughter too, and I couldn't save her. I won't fail again." The words shattered her. She saw it, the grief in him, the same grief that lived in her. Two enemies, but the same wound. Her power faded from her hand, dissolving into sparks. Slowly she dropped to her knees. For the first time in decades, the Queen of Fire, the goddess of war, bowed her head. Tears spilled down her face. She whispered their names like a prayer. Serenia, Lyra. The girls stirred, their small voices calling softly. "Mother!" They reached for her but still held onto Daniel's coat. That small act struck her harder than any weapon. They loved him. They trusted him. The queen's chest ached with something she had not felt in years. Humility. She looked at Daniel, her voice trembling. "You could have given them up. You could have let them die, but you did not." Daniel met her gaze steady and unflinching. "Because they deserved better." "Everyone does." Silence fell. The war drums outside seemed distant now, meaningless compared to the heartbeat of the two children between them. And then, the unthinkable happened. The Queen of War lowered her crown, pressing her forehead to the cold stone floor, not to a king, not to a god, but to a human soldier who had saved her daughters. Her whisper was so soft it almost vanished in the cave's echo. "Then I surrender. Not to humanity, not to your armies, to you. For keeping them alive." Daniel said nothing. He only held the girls tighter, his heart heavy with the weight of what had just changed. The war outside would rage on, but inside this cave, something greater had begun, a fragile truth born from grief, guarded by love. The galaxy would remember the Queen's war cry, but it would also remember her silence on the night she found her daughters asleep on a human's chest, and chose peace over vengeance.